Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast show, Students of the Game. We are here in week 6 with the NFL, reviewing our biggest winners, biggest losers, and our topics for discussion this week. I'm Justin Dade here with Elijah Freeman, and we'll be starting off this week with some teams that pulled off some big wins. Who do you like?
Well, Justin, if I'm going to go with a big win, I don't think there was perhaps anyone bigger, in my opinion anyways, than the Carolina Panthers. Panthers going into Seattle, a place that used to be hard to play anyways. Maybe it's not so much anymore, considering that the Panthers were undefeated, but I don't think anybody really thought that they were capable, perhaps, of going into Seattle, with who had Marshawn Lynch coming back, who is still the reigning NFC champions, and yet they were down, 9 points, I think, in the fourth quarter, come all the way back with a drive that ends 35 seconds left in the game with Cam Newton throwing a dart to Greg Olsen to win the game in Seattle, and now they're 5-0. I mean, it's amazing to me that the Panthers are doing this even in the absence of Kelvin Benjamin, who got hurt in the preseason. So now they're down to, I guess, to just Olsen, Devin Funchess, maybe. Is Jericho Cotchery on the Panthers? Or am I imagining that?
He used to be. I don't know if he still is, but I don't even think Funchess is playing. I believe Funchess is either hurt or very just not in the line. Yeah, look at their second leading receiver in that game was Ed Dixon, who's their second tight end. So, yeah, Funchess was active, but he hasn't done a whole lot.
2 catches, offense. 24. I mean, so it's that sort of thing. Greg Olsen is the 7 catches for 131 and the game-winning touchdown.
Well, there's no doubt that Olsen is Newton's favorite receiver, and there's nothing wrong with that because Olsen's a great tight end. But I think that if Cam Newton turns his career around, that throw could be a defining moment. Obviously, Olsen was open on the play, but to beat Seattle,
pretty open, yeah.
To beat Seattle like that on a last type of game scenario, at the end where we haven't really seen Cam Newton be a type of a leader that he needs to be. But I think that play could be looked at as maybe the start of something new for him, as much as I hate to say as a Falcons fan.
I don't know what you mean turns his career around. I mean, the dude hasn't been bad or anything like that. And in this game, actually, with the 2 interceptions that put them in that hole in the first place, it obviously wasn't pretty. Completes 55% of his passes in that game, but leads them on the drive at the end. He's also scored some rushing touchdowns, and it's amazing to me because the Panthers are one of those teams that's undefeated in the NFL. We're still 6 weeks into the season, and there are still 5 teams that haven't lost a game yet.
That's very impressive.
And the Panthers have managed to do this with the injuries having hit them hard. Luke Kuechly missed a couple games and then came back, so he's back and formidable as well. And I'm impressed that they can go up to Seattle, which maybe isn't as impressive or as much of a deal as it used to be, but still, this is a team that has the defense, at least they used to, and has the home field advantage, at least they used to, but now Cam Newton and the boys go in there and managed to pull out the win for the Panthers. I think that's the biggest win of the week, in my opinion.
What I meant is that, I think we can both agree that Cam Newton isn't your ideal quarterback when it comes to passing in the pocket. He has a tendency to throw the ball high. And I just don't think that Newton is the kind of leader that you want on your team. But what I mean is like this type of throws that the teammates can see that he can produce like that in big game situations. And, I feel like if he changes his attitude just a little bit, that he can turn out to be a fine quarterback. I have nothing against Cam Newton, but like I said, I think this is a big win for him personally, not just the franchise.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you on that sort of statement. We got a couple other big wins that you put down on this one, and one of them was the Philadelphia Eagles, who managed to win Monday Night Football in kind of a snoozer.
It was a very ugly football game.
This game did not appeal to me much. I'm going to be honest with you.
It was a very ugly football game. Both teams turned the ball over a lot. Sam Bradford still looks lost sometimes. But it's finally the emergence of DeMarco Murray that we've been waiting for. He's finally getting the carries that he deserves. He had 22 carries for 109 yards in the score. And I think that was important for him to finally get some confidence, to get this offense rolling. And I think as the season moves along, you're going to see that they're going to take the ball out of Bradford's hands a little bit more and hand it to the running backs, with Matthews and Murray. And, even though it was a sloppy win, when they won by 20, so it's not like they were that bad. I just think this is a big win for the Eagles, who now sit atop the NFC East. I mean, it's who's kind of been a kind of disappointing division, but, all the injuries in Dallas and then things like that going on. But I think the Eagles are the favorites in this division right now. Wouldn't you agree?
I think the Eagles are the favorites only because there's an absence of anybody else that can be the favorite. I thought the Giants were looking quite a bit better, having rattled off a couple of wins and were sitting at 3-2. But then they lose this game after going down on the first drive, easy score, Manning to Odell Beckham, and then didn't score the rest of the game. Turned the ball over a couple of times. Manning threw 2 picks. Even though they got turnovers and they turned the Eagles over with Bradford's 3 interceptions. They didn't score again, and so the Eagles look fairly impressive. But Sam Bradford has as many touchdowns as interceptions, and yet they're still 3-3 and atop the division only because I think there's just a default option.
And
almost.
the Eagles' defense played very well in that game, forcing those turnovers of Manning, and they're doing it without. I know Kendricks didn't play, but I don't know if Kiko Alonso played in this game either. I mean, they're missing 2 studs on defense. The defensive line is playing well. Fletcher Cox and Benny Logan.
I was
going to
say.
Good.
I'll tell you who did play in that game, Fletcher Cox, because
Yes.
he was in on every play.
But the secondary, I think Gruden's grinder for that game was Nolan Carroll, who lined up against Odell for a lot of that game, and he held his own. So I'd like to see the Eagles continue to play well and possibly win this division. But it'll be interesting to see if the Cowboys can stay competitive long enough until they get their starters back. But the other big performance I had is definitely the Pittsburgh Steelers. With the third-string quarterback Landry Jones having to come in when Michael Vick got injured, and then leading the team, basically Martavis Bryant awoke with Landry Jones at the quarterback position, and Jones looked good.
Landry Jones was 8 of 12 coming into that game in the third quarter. I mean, I should say he was 8 of 12 after coming into the game for the third quarter in exchange for Michael Vick, who had a hamstring injury. But yes, Landry Jones managed to throw 2 touchdown passes to Martavis Bryant, who had his biggest game of the season. He's only played in a couple of these, but Le'Veon Bell was also quite efficient, and they beat a Cardinals team that had looked like one of the best teams in the league.
That's what I love the Cardinals coming into this game. I picked them to win and maybe even handily, but I just love the way that the Cardinals have played. But I think I read and saw that penalties really hurt the Cardinals in that game, which is entirely possible that they only put up 13 points with that electric offense that they had.
Well, Carson Palmer managed to rack up 421 yards, but as
only had one touchdown.
Has been the case with Carson Palmer as well, though, in past, if it hasn't worked out for Carson Palmer, it's been the interceptions, and he threw 2 of them. And the running game that was kind of a 3-headed monster with Chris Johnson, David Johnson, and Andre Ellington, if I do my math here, combined for 56 yards and no touchdowns. So that's bad, especially against a defense in Pittsburgh that I think can be had, at least on the ground, if not through the air. They obviously racked up plenty of yards, but just not the points. And 2 touchdowns for Jones, who apparently will get the start this upcoming week.
I think we're going to bring up that people are wondering if there's a quarterback controversy. I don't really think there is. Even if Vic was healthy, I think for this game you got to stick with Jones. And the thing, another big disappointment that we had, Antonio Brown hasn't gotten the ball very much. But it was just surprised me that Martavis Bryant had so much success, but Patrick Peterson might have had a lot to do with that. So we got some big teams winning big games right now, and the Steelers was definitely a big one for me. Let's move on to some teams that we didn't expect to see them play like they did. Who do you got?
Well, we'd already kind of talked about one half of this deal, and actually some of your teams line up here if you look at the big wins versus the big disappointments. So I had praised the Panthers, but I'm going to flip the coin and just say, what on earth is wrong with the Seattle Seahawks? And I heard this stat as a matter of fact, they have lost 4 games this season, which is more games, I believe, than they lost all of last. No, I think they wound up losing 4 games last year in the entire regular season as well. So now they've lost 4 regular season games, and it's only week 6, and they have had a fourth quarter lead in all 4 of those games.
It's weird. We're not used to the Seahawks playing like this, and it's all of a sudden, like you said, that fear factor of going to play in Seattle. It's all of a sudden just not there anymore. And for some reason, the Panthers play them pretty well. I know Wilson beat them every time until this weekend, but all games were decided by under 7. I think those 2 teams match up pretty well, and the Panthers, came up on top. But yeah, Seattle, the run game's not there really. I mean, when it has been, it hasn't even been enough though. The defense has given up too much, even though they've played decent, just not good as used to what we're used to.
Thomas Rawls racked up a whole bunch of yards last weekend, but they still managed to lose that game, and when they blew a huge lead to the Bengals. This time the lead wasn't quite as big, but again, this is a team that has the Legion of Boom, Cam Chancellor's back after his holdout, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, but they got scorched by Newton at the end of the game, and blew another lead. They've blown leads in all 4 of those games, as I pointed out before. And maybe that's also due to the fact that the offense can't seem to close out the game.
The problem with Seattle, and it has been for years now, is that offensive line needs help. It does. I mean, and the fact that they traded away probably their best offensive lineman to New Orleans doesn't help this situation at all. And obviously, I'm not a big fan of that trade, even though Jimmy Graham did have the best game.
He did 8 catches for 140 yards. Nothing to sneeze at.
But that offensive line needs help. Russell Wilson's running for his life. I don't see a whole lot of Seahawk games, but when I do, you see Russell Wilson running a lot. And that's running away from defenders that are getting by easy.
Well, he has been actually quite effective when he's getting scrambling and gaining positive yardage. 8 rushes, 8 carries, if you will, for 53 yards. That's darn near close to, I think, 7 or 8 yards a carry. But you are correct, running for his life in the sense that he has been sacked already this season, and it's hard to even believe this number, 26 times.
That's what I'm talking about. I was going to go look for that number, but it doesn't surprise me.
That doesn't even seem right. That's over 4 sacks a game, and this is one of the most mobile QBs, so if he has any way of getting out of it, he will.
And please, people, don't place the blame right here on Russell Wilson because, we know that Russell Wilson isn't your ideal pocket passer either, but he's doing everything he can. Not only does he have limited wide receivers to work with, but he's also running for his life on just about every play. And if the run game can't get going, that's where Seattle's offense gets in trouble.
The run game was not exactly going. Marshawn Lynch did score his first touchdown of the season, also amazingly hard to believe. I know there's been injuries, but still, week 6, 17 carries, 54 yards, that's 3 yards a carry. Not a whole lot. Wilson almost ran for more.
But may I add, I remember people counting out the Seahawks last year around, not around this time, but a couple weeks after, they were around 500. This team is not a team you want to play in the playoffs, obviously. If this team sneaks into the playoffs somehow, if they can turn things around, it doesn't matter what seed they are. If they sneak in, they're a team that you don't want to play.
That is true, but I mean, they've got some work to do cut out for them. They're also kind of fortunate that Arizona lost so that they don't actually fall too far behind the Cardinals.
That's a good
or anything.
connection, yes.
And speaking of the Cardinals, you got them listed as a disappointment. Only 13 points with the offense had been so prolific. It's hard to even comprehend how 421 yards passing can only translate into 13 points. But like we said before, it was Carson Palmer turning the ball over, the worst he has all season long. One more disappointment you had listed on this little rundown here is a team that's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, we got to talk about them a little bit.
If we're going to praise them while they do well, then the dud that they kind of pulled out on Thursday Night Football on a short week against the New Orleans Saints team that we thought was just done and over with, that is notable for the Atlanta Falcons losing their first game of the season.
I have no problem bashing them when they not bashing, but talking about them when they play poorly. The Falcons' offense played pretty darn well in this game. They just turned the ball over 3 times. Plus, I'm going to say 4. Just because of the fumbled snap on the 4th down, which I'm just going to call a turnover. And it just miscues like that. I mean, the defense, we had no pass rush once again. And the Saints were down to their 3rd string offensive tackle. And I know, Vic Beasley, that you're a rookie, but you did not show up for a big division rivalry game on the road. I'm a little disappointed in his play, even though, like I said, he is young. He gets kind of a pass. But like I said, the offense played just fine. There's just the turnovers with James Stone, the backup center, struggles snapping the football. And, I think that the Falcons probably needed a game like this where things don't go their way. But to lose like that against the team we hate the most is just a tough one to swallow at this point.
Well, you look at statistically speaking, I mean, Matt Ryan completed 2/3 of his passes. He threw for 2 touchdowns. He didn't turn the ball over, almost 300 yards passing. Devontae Freeman scores 2 more times because he's just a scoring machine.
He had 100 yards on 13 carries, and I understand that we have Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, but if the run game is working, I don't understand why we abandon it. 13 carries for 100 yards.
So only 13, and his long was just a 25-yard touchdown, so it wasn't like there was a huge outlier of a 70-yard run or anything like that. He was only 13 carries for a guy that's been a nose for the end zone and racking up all kinds of yards from scrimmage. They did get him 8 receptions, so he gets 21 total touches, but that does not seem to be enough for a back that's one of the best in the NFL at this point in the season.
It is frustrating to see a little bit. I think, though, like I said, that this is going to be a good experience for the Falcons, so they know what it takes, to play in division rivalry games. I hope Dan Quinn sure now knows what it means to be in a rivalry like this.
Can't take those for granted. And I was quick to bury Drew Brees sort of and say like maybe with the injury to his rotator cuff or something, or he just doesn't seem to have it anymore. But he completed only 9 incompletions, 30 of 39, 312 yards.
I mean, this is a very obvious statement, but it's more impactful to Brees. I think if you don't get to Brees, he's going to pick you apart. And I understand that's fine. Most quarterbacks don't play well when they have pressure. But Drew Brees especially, if he's got a clean pocket, will tear you apart with the pump fake that he has, and he's got all that extra time to throw balls downfield. So, like I said, I think this will be a good experience for the Falcons. I'm kind of worried about the Titans. Trust me, I'm a little worried about the Titans because Mariota might not play. It's the type of game at the Falcons, it seems to happen. When they play backup quarterbacks, that they tend to struggle. I could just see the story right now that Mettenberger, he's gonna have a great game. We'll probably still pull off the win, but they're gonna have anyway. I won't go on with that. But.
Well, speaking of, this is a little bit of a segue, perhaps, if you want to go to the top performers of the Week 6 in the NFL. We kind of already talked about how Landry Jones was 8 of 12 through 2 touchdown passes in relief of Michael Vick and got them the win and probably earned himself a start in Week 7. But speaking of quarterbacks who could have easily been backups and actually was benched last week, I don't think you could possibly have had a better comeback from that experience of being benched against the Cardinals than Matthew Stafford did against the Bears, albeit a team that is pretty bad on defense, let's just say. But the 37-34 overtime victory for the Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford was phenomenal.
He put the team on his back this week. He really did. You know, a lot of people are quick to judge Stafford, and he did have that one bad decision where he tried to flick the ball to Theo Riddick and it got intercepted. But the 4 touchdown passes, he finally trusted his arm to throw the ball down the field, and Calvin Johnson had the best game of his season so far.
Get the ball to Calvin.
And, he's actually been, like they pick on Stafford for trying to force it to him too much. So obviously it's a time and place type of thing. But I think, obviously, I don't want to say this is a big win for the Lions, but it's obviously good to get
It's a first win for the Lions.
Get the goose egg out. And it is against the Bears, but I think this is a good showing from Stafford to finally show that he can kind of carry the team by himself when the running game isn't there.
Calvin Johnson still got it. If anyone had any question about that, 6 catches, 166 yards, and a bomb in the overtime when there was only about 3-4 minutes left in the game, he went up and got that one. It was reminiscent of Calvin from maybe 2-3 years ago when he was absolutely dominating. I think he's been perhaps a little bit hurt, hobbled by the Lions' kind of ineffective offense, but boy, did they make it look easy. Stafford 405 yards passing, and he could have let his confidence be shot after getting benched for Dan Orlovsky in the awful game against the Cardinals. But man, did Matthew Stafford make a huge comeback statement in this game against the Bears to get the Lions their first win.
Now, often underlooked as the defensive side of the ball when we talk about these top performers by week, but remember when we talked about last week about the Miami Dolphins and how poorly that they've played, and we talked about that they only had 1 sack on the year coming into
was
this
unbelievable.
game, which it boggles all of our minds. But Cameron Wake, the star defensive end for Miami, woke up 4 sacks this week and 2 forced fumbles in the Dolphins' huge win over the Titans by 28. And it was, I don't know if you want to call it the Dan Campbell effect. I'm not going to. But it was a huge game for Wake to finally awaken this defensive
little
line.
Cameron Wake pun.
But 4 sacks and 2 forced fumbles is a big way to show your name.
You could say he really left the Titans' offense in his wake. So one bad pun out of the way, but if I made a bad pun for every single sack Cameron Wake had, I'd still have 3 more to go. And he got all those in the first half? Is that what I heard?
I'm not sure, but
he was people were saying it was reminiscent of the game in Week 1 last year against the Patriots where they really ruined Tom Brady's day in the season opener. And I'm going to say that this is the Dan Campbell effect. They obviously played much more inspired, it seemed like. They hadn't, even in their one win of the season, it was a close contest against the Washington Redskins in Week 1. They had lost a couple of games in a row, then had a bye week, and came right back out, trucked the Tennessee Titans. Cameron Wake was a huge part of that. Tannehill, Lamar Miller had 100 yards rushing. It was perhaps, I'm going to say it's almost entirely thanks to the change in coaching staff, to the apparently much more fiery Campbell than the reserved Phil.
So this isn't something I wrote down, but this will be a good debate. Who has a better chance of salvaging their season, Seattle or Miami at this point?
Well, Miami's got the I mean, they have a better reason perhaps to salvage the season with that sort of coaching switch or whatever. But Seattle has got way more talent, I would figure. Although maybe that's not entirely true. Miami was obviously very underachieving with the talent that they've acquired, perhaps in free agency. But I still got to go with Seattle. They kind of did it last year, started the season 3-3. They're only one game behind that now. And the Dolphins are residing in a division that has an undefeated Patriots and a very impressive New York Jets team. Holy smokes! Where'd they come from?
The only thing I will bring up is that the Dolphins are 2-3, not 2-4, and I feel like there's less competition for that second wild card spot in the AFC than there is in the NFC, just because we pointed out how well the Cardinals are playing, Falcons, Panthers, all up there.
But if you look at the second wild card, though, one of them is going to be to the NFC South team that doesn't win the championship. But you know what other team is?
That's not for sure yet either.
You'd figure, unless either the Panthers or Falcons really fall apart. But you know what that second wild card team is? It's just the Vikings at 3-2. That's it. So I mean, it's hard to say. That's an interesting question. It's a fair point. I just think the Seahawks. I have more experience to go off of, and they're not chasing two teams in their division. They're just chasing one.
I think there's a fair case to be made for both, and on the other side of that case, it's fair for not being able to turn it around.
And so you got one last top performer for for the show here, and that is the man who I am going to argue is the very finest receiver in all of the NFL.
You're not going to win the argument, but he is playing good football.
I am going to win the argument.
He's playing good football.
The most impressive wide receiver who has had two different quarterbacks shuffle in and out of the lineup. Neither of them have been all that good, honestly. He has made them look good if they have at all. DeAndre Hopkins, 23 years old, third season out of Clemson, second in the league in touchdown catches. I should say he's kind of like tied for second behind a couple guys with 6. He's got 5. Leads the league by a mile in yards and is second in the NFL in catches as well. DeAndre Hopkins doing this with two different quarterbacks, neither of which are very good. And he's the only option on the Texans, and yet is racking this up. And the array of catches he pulled off against the Jaguars was amazing to me.
I mean, obviously, it's the Jaguars secondary, and the Houston doesn't play a whole lot of talented secondaries. But when you talk to me about a top elite wide receiver, is what can they do to take over a game? And DeAndre Hopkins has done exactly that. He's had at least 10 targets in every game so far, and I believe he has over 100 yards in the last 4. And he's targeted a lot, obviously, because he is one of the few options on that team. Now that Arian Foster's back, and I think that Foster comes back, I think that helps Hopkins more than hurts, so that they can't double him at all. And I love Hopkins, and I think he's probably, I'm going to say he's the hottest receiver in football right now, but he's not the best receiver.
Okay, perhaps a prisoner of the moment. I'm just really impressed that it's done with either Hoyer or Mallett at quarterback.
Right, I understand that. That's why I'm very impressed by his ability to take over the game. I watched some of that Colts game, or the other, right, it was the Colts where he was running all over the field and he was able to make all those catches and they weren't able to stop him. Or was that a week ago?
That was the Colts. I mean, in the last 3 games, gone for 157, 169, and 148 with those 2 touchdowns against the Jags to kind of pull a game that they were trailing relatively late in the game against Jacksonville. You just underlined here on our little rundown, Jets for real. I had just talked about how the Jets honestly look like at 4-1. I will tell you, the answer to your question lies about 5 days from now, when they go up to Foxborough to play the undefeated Patriots. Then I will tell you if the Jets are for real.
Can you really use that game as a judgment for that right now?
Yes, because the Patriots have owned the Jets for how many? Essentially ever since Tom Brady, first trotted out onto the field.
The Patriots have owned the NFL for that time as well, is what I'm trying to say.
But especially in the division.
This is if they're competitive in that game, obviously it's a good sign. But the Patriots right now are clicking on all cylinders. I mean, we can talk about Patriots in a little bit. But do you think the Jets can make a deep playoff push right now?
I don't really trust Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Now, he's played really well this season so far.
Yes. He's also, in the game that they lost, really looked terrible against the Philadelphia Eagles and turned over too many times for them to win that game. But the thing is, Chris Ivory has 5.5 yards a carry, has managed to find the end zone 4 different times. He is only played in 4 games and is 3rd in the NFL in rushing. This dude is multi-purpose. He racked up, I don't even know how many yards. It was almost 200 yards from scrimmage. Amazing. And Brandon Marshall is an absolute beast as well. Eric Decker's getting himself involved in the offense, and their defensive line is frightening. So
Ivory's making what's making this team go right now, and I didn't like Ivory. I knew he had a lot of talent coming out of New Orleans. I just didn't think he'd do a whole lot with it in New York. But I'm very surprised at how well he's played this year. I believe he's third in the league.
Third in the league in
rushing yards. Yes. So that's
and only
obviously
played in
positive.
4 games. Only 4 games.
You know, I'd like to say that Ryan Fitzpatrick can keep this going, but I feel like he's going to slow down eventually. And I mean, we just don't really know it. I don't think we know enough yet about the Jets to know if they can make a deep playoff push, because the Patriots and the Bengals look so good right now.
Oh, yes. Speaking of the Bengals, they won again. They went up to Buffalo. Yeah, Tyrod Taylor wasn't playing. It was E.J. Manuel. But LaShawn McCoy was back and was making some nice things happen. But the Bengals are so unbelievably stacked offensively. You can throw to Tyler Eifert, who's tied for the league with 6 receiving touchdowns. You can do the 1-2 back punch of Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill, who can both run the ball and catch the ball out of the backfield. You got A.J. Green, a top elite wide receiver, along with Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu. Andy Dalton is once again avoiding turnovers, just like I said last week. This Bengals team, this is going to be the year, I think, that the Bengals at least win a playoff game.
I was hoping I could get to argue with you a bit, but I don't. I agree. I think, that people think that Andy Dalton can't play in the playoffs. I think this is a different Cincinnati Bengals team, and I see it because they're playing in clutch games. Like I believe last week, they're showing up and they're winning games that people think, oh, maybe this is the week that Cincinnati comes back to earth. But Andy Dalton, I think, is a different quarterback right now, and that offense runs again with the offensive line that they have. It's top 5 in the NFL for sure, in my opinion. That they've been able to help them run the ball and keep Dalton protected. But all the weapons they have are great, and the defense has always been solid. That's never been the problem. I believe Carlos Dunlap leads the league in sacks.
He does, 6.5 sacks.
So I like this Bengals team a lot, and I don't know if they play the Patriots this year, but if they do before the playoffs, then that'll be one heck of a football
I'm not honestly sure either. We could probably look into that perhaps, but Dalton, 14 touchdown passes, just 2 interceptions. He's second in the NFL in passing yards, and he's averaging 9.1 yards per attempt. Huge play potential from that offense with all of those different guys they can do. And you mentioned the Patriots and how they're also undefeated. So there are 5 undefeated teams now. We talked about the Panthers. We talked about these Bengals. We've mentioned the Patriots a bit. The Packers also managed to just barely keep their record perfect. They had to come up with a 4th down stop at 4th and goal with the onslaught of the Chargers. And
good play by the rookie on that play.
Demarius Randall, absolute standing defensive play to break up the Rivers' chance at a touchdown pass to tie the game. If you ask me Patriots or Packers,
I want to know right now, who is between the two teams that they played this week, who do you like more?
Well, if they play after the Packers bye week, maybe that's a little different. But the Packers are so injury-riddled right now that they got to get those guys healthy. Because otherwise, right now, the Patriots have been much less injury-riddled, and therefore, I would probably say the Patriots.
I like the Patriots right now, too. But I think the way that the Packers have played, despite the injuries, show a lot about their defense and how well they have played. And
they did give up 500 yards passing to Rivers, but that was on 65 attempts, so you can say...
They literally threw the ball all game. But no one
they shut the run
twice.
down all kinds of good, if that makes any sense. And they did manage to bend but don't break. I mean, they gave up 20 points. That's not terrible. The Chargers couldn't convert them into points, and the Packers now have 23 sacks on the season between Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, Mike Daniels. And they didn't even have B.J. Raji in this game, who's had a really impressive bounce-back season. So the Packers, I think, defensively are improved. Offensively, just have all of their weapons. Ty Montgomery got hurt in their game against the Chargers. We know, obviously, that Nelson's going to miss this entire season. They managed to lose Devontae Adams kind of a couple of games ago. And Eddie Lacy doesn't seem to be 100% either.
Yeah, we won't talk about Lacy.
Rough for fantasy owners
owners, yes. And if you want to transition to that right now, we can go in our fantasy bit for the week. I have a weekly article every week I post on fantasypros.com. Great website.
Ooh, if you're cross-promotional content
if you're looking for fantasy help throughout the week and before next season, Fantasy Pros is an outlet that I use. It's a consensus ranking-based system. And I do a weekly article, 3 studs and 3 duds. I'll just run through them quickly. We don't have to talk about them, but My three big studs, DeAndre Hopkins with 26 points, and these are all standard scoring, by the way. Stafford had 33. Martavis Bryant, as we talked about, had 25 points. My three duds for the week, though, mention A.J. Green with 3 points. That had a lot to do with the fact that everybody else was playing so well that Green didn't get a whole lot of looks.
Exactly.
And Eddie Lacy, another dud with 1 point on the week. And Antonio Brown, as we mentioned, had 2 points on the week. So that's your little fantasy rundown for the week. And we can segue back into some teams we're looking at. I want to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. I know we talked about them last week, too. But they're 1-5.
That's amazing to me. How this is the team that always makes the playoffs in the AFC, or is at least close, has always been consistently pretty solid, but whether they're winning the Super Bowl or at least going to the playoffs and winning a playoff game, 1-5, and it's just weird because there's Justin Forsett is still producing on running the ball. Steve Smith had another monster game. Did they not play defense? Are they not getting to the quarterback? What is wrong? I don't even get it.
I don't get I would love to know the last time that the Baltimore Ravens were 1-5 because it's
probably never.
It's very drastic. It's unbelievable if you ask me. I would have never guessed the Ravens to have been like that. They were they weren't my favorite to win the Super Bowl this year, but they were up there just because I felt like they could run the ball and play good defense, which is what I think you need to win in those big games. And they can't play defense right now. And I think it's the secondary is just played that poorly.
It could be. Justin Forsett didn't have a huge game. Joe Flacco's stats in the season are nothing remarkable. 8 touchdown passes, 7 INTs. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 picks in this game against the 49ers that they lost. And they made Colin Kaepernick look good for the second straight week, even after he had looked bad for like 3 or 4 straight weeks. Kaepernick looked really quite impressive. He threw for over 300 yards and didn't even have to throw the ball 30 times to do it. They really did get torched, whether it was Torrey Smith burning his old team in the Ravens, or Anquan Bolden burning his old team in the Ravens. Both of those guys combined for almost 200 yards receiving. And Bruce Miller, the tight end, had a 52-yard catch and run as well. They really can't play defense, and it's weird because they're the Baltimore Ravens.
That's what's weird. I'm looking at the stats, and they're really not as bad as I expected to be, but the one that sticks out to me is they only got 8 sacks through 6 weeks.
Is that the absence of Terrell Suggs since the middle of week 1?
It probably has to have 8 sacks is definitely not what you expect from a Ravens defense through 6 games.
Basically won a game.
That's something I expect from, like the Falcons or a team like that who don't generate a lot of pass rush. But I feel like that's where this is coming from. They're 15th in the league against the run, and they're only giving up 258 yards of passing a game. So it's not great. It's not normal Ravens standards, but it's not that bad. So I guess we just need to be Ravens fans to really understand what is going on.
I have not watched the team, but seriously, if the Steelers kicker Josh Scobie hadn't absolutely fallen apart at the end of that Thursday night football game a few weeks back, they'd be winless. Now, obviously, they could also have probably won some of these games. They only lost by 5 points in this one, and they probably could have had some other ones, but they aren't. They aren't pulling them off. And this is a Ravens team that always used to just kind of be one of those teams that would come through in the clutch, it would seem like. And Joe Flacco isn't having a bad season, maybe, but too many turnovers, not running the ball all that effectively. The numbers don't seem to suggest this team should be the worst team in the AFC, which they are. They are the team with the worst record in the AFC, tied with the Lions at 1-5. They're done. Your question is, do they have a chance at the playoffs? No. It's over. They're chasing a 6-0 Bengals team, a 4-2 Steelers team. It's absolutely over. And this is the bottom is falling out right now.
Right, and I agree with you there. Again, we don't get a whole lot of chance to debate this week, but I did have an error on the Ravens are 24th against the run for average yards of carry. Let's see, how many are they giving up a week? The Ravens, they're only giving up 94 yards a game on the ground, but I know as soon as I switch to passing that things are going to get ugly. Let's look here.
Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen, please hold.
Yeah, they're giving up 286 passing yards a game.
Obviously,
and
not great.
I also screwed up. They have 18 sacks. They were only sacked 8 times. So they do have 18 sacks. Again, my fault on the stats here.
That arguably makes it even more baffling how they can possibly be
very true.
1-5.
Yeah. So yeah, my fault on the stats. But yeah, we don't really know where it's coming from. I guess we can both agree that the playoffs are quite a long shot for Baltimore right now.
And what's weird is even at the 1-5 record, I mean, they fell 7 spots in the power rankings, which is the thing we'll finish up with here. If you want, now they're at 28, at basically the bottom of the NFL. With
When
a couple
was the
other
last
one-win
time they were
teams.
that low? I'd love to know.
Oh,
Wow.
probably never. Basically, it's rough. At the top of the power rankings, he's still got the. This is Elliot Harrison on NFL.com. The Patriots number 1, hard to argue with that.
Which
Packers
we agree.
number 2, and the Bengals number 3. I think you could possibly argue for Bengals above the Packers just because their wins have been more impressive. Perhaps?
I wouldn't though. I think this is the right place for the Bengals. I'm glad they're slotted at 3, finally getting some respect, and I love seeing. I mean, I don't love, but it's good to see that he has giving the Panthers some respect at the 4, and then falling all the way to 5. From 4 last, well, not all the way, but the Broncos
all the way down 1 spot.
Right. The Broncos now at 5, and we didn't talk a whole lot about the Broncos. We talked plenty about them next week, and Peyton Manning and his struggles. But the defense scored another touchdown this week.
Aqib Talib running a pick 6 back,
and they arguably won the game for him again. There's no way that they're going to be able to keep going with this. And I see the Falcons here at 6, and personally, I feel like they should be dropping a little bit more than that. I don't
Perhaps.
think in any way that the Falcons are the 6th best team in the NFL. I mean, maybe around 10, I think, would be better for me.
Isn't that amazing that the Broncos are like a one-dimensional team, and that dimension is defense.
Yes.
Of all things, Peyton Manning leads the NFL in interceptions with 10, and to just 7 touchdowns. And the running game is nothing much special, and yet they just keep winning. It's unbelievable to me. He's got the Jets, which we talked about, at number 7. And the Steelers up a couple of spots, 5 spots, as a matter of fact, all the way to number 8.
Let me talk one more thing about Manning. That touchdown pass he had to Emmanuel Sanders that won them that game at the end barely got there. It was that close to being knocked away. It was vastly underthrown again. Sanders basically made that play. If Peyton underthrows that by another foot, they may not win that game. But it's just the struggles we see. These lofty passes, the wobbly throws. He doesn't look like his old self, but, I mean, that's enough Peyton for the week, I guess.
Yeah. The Arizona Cardinals down 3 spots to number 9. He's got the Vikings at number 10, who Teddy Bridgewater wasn't very good. Neither was Peterson,
that seems
arguably.
High a little bit. Yeah.
It does seem a bit high. The Vikings are 3-2. They're better. They have a better record than any team in the NFC East, which has got the Eagles at number 11, and the Buffalo Bills and their inability to win games in back-to-back weeks at 3-3.
Right.
The Colts, we cannot possibly end this podcast without discussing how absolutely stupid the Colts' attempt at a fake punt was.
Yeah, we don't really know what that's about.
I don't know that anything more needs to be said. I have no idea what was happening, but it was dumb. That's what I know. There was that basic math tells you that's not going to work. If you have 2 guys, a guy snapping it to another guy, and there's 4 Patriots at the line of scrimmage. No idea what that was. That was a tipping point.
Andrew Luck finally had a good game, though, in his game back.
He
played very
did.
well in that game, and I hope that this is, the game that gets him back to playing more like normal Andrew Luck. But it's weird to see the Colts rise a spot while losing, but obviously to the best team in football, though.
30 of 50, 312 yards, 3 scores, and no picks. Not at all a bad game. If they didn't do a dumb fake punt, maybe they would have won the game.
So I want to talk about here a second. We'll talk about from the 15 to 20 teams. We have the Rams, Seahawks, Chargers, Raiders, Redskins, and Browns. It's weird to see those last 3 up so high. Which one of these teams do you think has a decent chance to maybe sneak into the playoffs but continue to play well?
From 15 to 20?
I mean, I think we can leave out that bottom 3, unfortunately.
Perhaps, yeah. But in the Redskins with the bad East, maybe the Eagles start taking off, but otherwise, maybe it's possible. I doubt it, especially the way Kirk Cousins turned the ball over again in losing that game to the Jets.
I think the Chargers are the best team in that top 3 right there.
Can they protect Phillip Rivers? Not exactly, but Phillip Rivers continues to be criminally underrated. Threw 500 yards, like we said, didn't turn the ball over. First quarterback in NFL history to throw 500 yards and not turn it over and still lose. So that's rough for the Chargers.
And Keenan Allen literally took over that game by himself had he not gotten injured in the second half. He could have
already
set an
had
NFL
14
record.
catches through basically 3 quarters.
And everything he threw at him, he caught. And I am a big advocate of Sam Shields because Sam Shields is a very good corner. And he made plays on Shields on the afternoon. And I think Allen is one of the best receivers in the NFL also, who's kind of a little bit underrated as well, but he's finally having his coming out party just like Hopkins.
If you want one team, though, I mean, it might be a little bit cliche of me to say this, but the team at the top of that 15 to 20 range, the St. Louis Rams, they do have a fearsome defensive line.
And a run game now.
Todd Gurley's a monster. They had the week off. They've got plenty of talent. Todd Gurley's going to take the league over, I'm pretty sure. And
That offensive line is young and it's not playing that well, but they will continue to play well as the season goes on, and I think that offensive line will be fine in years to come. They need a legitimate number one wide receiver because they don't have one, and they haven't.
That's fair.
They keep spending draft picks, Stedman Bailey, Taven Austin. They keep spending these top picks on wide receivers that just haven't gotten the job done, whether or not that has to do with the quarterback play. But they need a legitimate number one wide receiver in order to compete, in my opinion.
Well, last we saw Nick Foles, he was absolute garbage against the Packers. Speaking of quarterbacks who are kind of garbage, this was a team that didn't actually play this week, but just a note, FYI, Brandon Weeden has been benched for Matt Castle, who the Cowboys acquired kind of a couple of weeks ago from the Buffalo Bills. So we'll see if that jumpstarts an offense that's lost 3 straight games.
Okay, keep going down the list. Cowboys 21, Dolphins 22, 49ers 23, Bears stay even at 24, Texans up to 25, Buccaneers 26, Saints 27. That seems a little bit low after what they pulled off against the Falcons, wouldn't you agree?
Well, they did manage to jump 3 spots in this particular power ranking. I think that he's just looking at the fact that the Saints, they did have this win. It's maybe a win against a division rival, do it in back-to-back weeks. So they did win. They have won 2 out of 3 games, I guess, considering they beat the Cowboys, then lost.
The Saints are not very good, but I think they're better than people are giving them credit for right now. The defense is not very good, but Cameron Jordan single-handedly took over that game against Atlanta. So I think a couple more spots for the Saints would have been nice, but yeah, that Ravens at 28 is a scary thing to be looking at.
It's unbelievable. They dropped 7 spots because it's just so bizarre. 1-5, unbelievable. And
what do they have? What do you write on there? And anything?
Just that it's hard to believe a John Harbaugh coach football team is 1-5, and I absolutely concur with that. He's got the Titans at 29. Remember when all was well with the Titans and Mariota had thrown 4 touchdown passes in the first half against the Buccaneers and.
Oh yeah, that's obviously unrealistic expectations.
Okay, but
after that one.
Not even anything near that ever since. And now Mariota has a sprained MCL. Could be out a couple of weeks, maybe even close to a month.
I think, like I said, we see Mettenberger this week for Tennessee, but I think that will help them. I don't think rushing Mariota back for a game is a good idea at this point, especially after such a poor game that he had. So I expect to see Mettenberger this week for Tennessee.
And then the Kansas City Chiefs, speaking of teams that in week 1 just looked so much better than they do now, 1-5. And as he says, at least the Royals are in the ALCS. They're like the opposite right now of a little cross sports here, but they're a little like the opposite of the Kansas City Chiefs, who have just absolutely fallen apart, scored 10 points. Couldn't get any offense going. I know Jamal Charles is hurt, but man, the Chiefs and their 5 straight losses of the longest losing streak in the NFL, that's absolutely rough. The Lions did manage to go up from 32 to 31 because they won a game, and he's got the Jaguars in a familiar place at the bottom of the league with 4 straight losses. And Blake Bortles, 3 touchdown passes,
but 3 ugly interceptions.
3 interceptions. And one of them was taken to the house by the Houston Texans.
I think Bortles is pressing right now, and I don't blame the kid. He's trying to do a whole lot for a team that doesn't have a whole lot. Thankfully, we are now seeing the coming out party of Allen Robinson, but they don't have a run game, and their defense is still probably the worst in football no matter what they do over the offseason. Telvin Smith has played pretty good football, though. But I think the Jaguars are missing impact players on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, that means they're missing Dante Fowler, who tore up his knee in the first mini camp or whatever?
That could have made a whole lot of difference, obviously, for them this year. And I like Blake Bortles. I just feel like he's pressing too much at this time just because he's trying to do so much.
Asked to do a lot, but not ultimately getting the wins. And in this case, they had a lead over their division rival Houston Texans at home, but could not hold it. Bortles is still turning the ball over. 7 interceptions on the season. A whole bunch of yards. Not even a whole lot of yards per attempt, though. They're putting the ball up a lot. I thought T.J. Yeldon was supposed to help a little bit more with that.
I think it's
hasn't yet.
I think they have the worst secondary in the league. You can obviously make a case for the Raiders in that as well. And I mean, Jonathan Cyprian's a decent safety, but the corner situation is just awful, and they can't cover anybody. So there's a lot of problems with the Jaguars, but those are the ones that I just pointed out that they need to get fixed. moving on.
So that is basically a look at the power rankings. There's a lot of movement. It seemed like the teams jumping 6 spots, 7 spots, 5 spots, not uncommon. Teams rising and falling. I mean, it is that time, but there still is at the top of it a whole slew of 5 undefeated teams, which is probably the most amazing storyline to me of the entire league, especially considering that one of them has a quarterback who's regressing badly. Another one has almost no receivers in Carolina. Another one of them has been incredibly injury-prone in the Packers. And another one of them... in the Bengals, never supposed to be this good. And
how far I think the Patriots and the Packers are so far ahead of the rest of the league. I mean, obviously we'll put the Bengals near that discussion.
Oh, I would definitely.
But these two teams right now, there are no two teams anywhere near the talent and the way that they're playing right now, in my opinion. And I mean, these were popular Super Bowl picks before the season, but
definitely.
I like the way that those two teams are playing, and I just think that they're light years ahead of some of these other teams in the league right now.
Well, hopefully for the Packers, as a Packers homer here, they can get healthy over the bye week that they have. The Patriots will continue rolling on, and I think what's probably one of the big marquee matchups of the entire, maybe even season to this point in that AFC East. Let's see if the Jets are for real, or let's see if the Patriots just keep rolling on. Patriots versus Jets should be an awfully fun one to watch.
It's also possible. Do you think I was reading about this earlier this week, that people thinking the Patriots could possibly go undefeated again.
I don't know about that.
I did read that their schedule is not as tough, and they do have to go to Sports Authority Field and play Denver, and they have those tough division games.
Peyton Manning still has an arm by then, seriously.
Right, but other than those division games, that anything can happen in division games as shown by the Falcons this week.
Oh, they get to play the NFC East? That is not fair.
It's possible that they could come out undefeated again in the regular season.
Well, every time they have a scandal in the offseason or like early in the season that bothers them, what happened at the end after the Spygate, 16-0. I just don't. Teams don't go undefeated. It's so unbelievably rare. You get an off game, a freak injury happens. A team in your division plays you well. They do have the Jets twice. I don't know.
I feel like one of those losses will come to the Jets or to the Bills, and then like I said, possibly against
some
Denver.
Random freak loss somewhere. They get to play the AFC South too. This is not fair. How did they get this easy schedule? What is this? You get to play the AFC South with all of its terrible teams and the NFC East with all of its terrible teams.
Yeah, and they've played obviously the best team in that division, the Colts, and already beat them.
Oh.
So,
where can I get this schedule? Seriously.
So yeah, this was a good talk this week. I'm looking forward to the games. This is the stretch of the season where teams are trying to make that push for the playoffs. I know it's early to talk about the playoffs, but
playoffs.
These next
Don't talk about playoffs.
These next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be huge for teams.
You kidding me? Playoffs?
That are trying
to
win
a game.
Trying to find their identities. So
playoffs.
Before this continues, we are going to be signing off here for this week. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and see you guys next week here on Students of the Game.
Playoffs?